Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Deal Quest community, I'm so excited to have Jeremy Stratton on the podcast. He's the founder and chief executive officer at Business Legal Lifecycle. He's the author of the Amazon #1 best-selling book, The Business Legal Lifecycle. The Business Legal Lifecycle is an innovative legal concept in the law tech space to help business owners understand complex legal matters in a simple to understand manner. They also understand why they need to take certain legal steps, and it helps business owners develop a plan for the future. Jeremy, welcome to the Deal Quest podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Corey. Really looking forward to it.
Well, it's funny. I don't have that many people, in the legally related space. Obviously that's what I do, but I'm really interested in hearing about what you've developed here, and we'll talk about a little bit about you being a lawyer in Australia. But before we get into any of that, and your deal experience and everything you've done, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because certainly a legal tech software, developer wasn't it, and maybe I'm guessing, and maybe a lawyer wasn't it either. I don't know. You tell me.
Oh, that's an awesome question, Corey. And I definitely wasn't what I was planning to do, because I don't even think law tech was a thing back in the 80s when I was growing up. But I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. I love space. I love all things sci-fi. I love Star Trek, Star Wars, all those TV shows. And I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. And that was something that I remember vividly from my early years. That's where I wanted to go. I never really went there and found other passions in life. But when I was growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Well, nowadays you have enough money and you can, just pay, Bezos or Musk or somebody, and they'll get you up there, right?
Well, I'm only 42, so by the time I get to the 80s, maybe maybe the cost will have come down quite a bit, and we'll be able to go no matter what.
I love it. All right, and one other question, looking back. What was the first deal of any type you ever did? It could have been something small as a kid, early in your career, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, I remember early on doing deals with my parents to let me go and get stuff that I wanted. So I have this vivid memory of a space book that I wanted back when I was in primary school. And the school had one of those sales where you could go and buy books. And I went along and there was this really fancy, full of pictures book about space. And I remember doing a deal with my parents to let me have the money to be able to go and buy that. I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, certainly not poor or anything. It was very wasn't poor, wasn't wealthy, middle class, and so I had to earn my keep to be able to do that. And yes, that was the first deal that I remember doing. Love
it. Yeah, it sounds. I always say I grew up in a lower middle class family. There was always food on the table, but it was a bit paycheck to paycheck, and there wasn't free. I far from got everything I wanted. In fact, most things there was always a negotiation. Let's put it that way.
Yep, always a negotiation, and I think it probably helps you develop as you're growing up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no question. In fact, my wife hates when I negotiated with her, but she loves that I negotiate with everybody else. I'm like, when I'm doing it, but it's not with her. She's thrilled with it, right? It helps, So she's like, go negotiate that, but not with me. We're going to get into the deals aspect, but talk to us a little bit more about what the Business Legal Lifecycle is. And I know there are aspects of that identify deal opportunities for folks. But before we, just give them the broader overview of what the tool does and who it's for and that kind of stuff.
So Corey, it's for small to medium-sized business owners, and I see that as businesses that have around 15 to 20, or no more than 15 to 20 employees, and turnover of no more than about 20 to 30 million. And that doesn't matter whether it's Australia or the US. Around that seems to be a good mark. And what it's about is identifying the legal risks that people have in their business. Because the frustration that I had with the law, and I still have with the law to this day, is that it's very reactive. People react to problems when they arise. And there's so much that I see and where I have clients who've had problems where if they had just been proactive rather than just reacting to problems when they arise, they could have saved themselves a lot of money. We talk about deals and, they come to mind where, one of the clients that did a deal that gave me the impetus to actually write the book and come up with the concept, lost $1 million of other people's money because he didn't get the right advice early on. He didn't structure his partnership the right way. And for me, the Lifecycle was born out of that frustration that I have with the legal profession of, I'll just come to us when there's a problem to be solved, and people just want that problem solved. So for me, it's around every business, everything you do in life has a legal risk, and business has those legal risks. And what we do is we help identify what those are. We help to educate business owners on why they need to understand these legal aspects. And then we tell you who you need to go and see. It may not be a lawyer or an attorney in every case. It might be that you need to get a coach. It might be that you need to get an accountant. But we help identify who that is that you need to speak to so that you can get those legal risks minimized and build a great business. Because my goal is to make legal advice accessible for all SMEs around the world. And we do that by bringing out these products and helping them to see how they can be proactive in what they do and not be reactive and avoid those problems.
Love it. So give people an idea of just some of the stages that you identified in your product for business.
Yes. So there's 13 phases. I won't go through all those phases. What I'll do is I break them up into 4 sections. So the first 3 are the startup phases. So they're when you're just starting out and starting to get your clients and making sure that you've got all of the stuff right in the business to make sure that your structures are right, that you're engaging with your clients properly. And it's really about that startup and making sure you've done that right. And can I tell you that, I act for and I work with businesses all over the world, and even ones that have been in existence for 20 years often need to go back and look at those things, right? Because things change as you're going. Then the next 3 phases is all about consolidation. So it starts on with bringing on employees and making sure that you do that right. So once you've got a business and you've got some clients, you're starting to get some traction, what does it need to do that you need to do to consolidate that business and get it right? And there's a bit of a dip in if people go to our website and they see the life cycle, there's a bit of a dip in those phases. And that's because as you're consolidating, there's going to be a dip of some sort in your business. And we want to call that out. So we have those first 2 parts, and then we get into the expansion phases and scaling phases. So it's about having all the chocks in place so that you can do that, to then get to the last part, which is the sale of business. And when I do talks and when I speak on podcasts, I always make the point that at some point you're going to exit your business. It's inevitable. So we want to make sure that you've got all the foundations in place so that when you sell it, you've got everything right. So that's the last part, is the sale of business and the business exit phase. So in a broad sense, we have those 4 big areas that we do for the life cycle, and it encapsulates all the things that you need to do to build a great business and sell it for the best price when you get to that point.
And so to folks, to anybody, it would be obvious that on that last phase, the sale phase, that's the deal, right? But obviously in the expansion phase, I'm sure there's all kinds of places where there are opportunities for deals. And it's interesting to me, because one of the things that I find with companies, and this is something that I've said on the podcast, the premise of the podcast all the time, and I'm interested, to hear your take on it and how it plays into maybe some of the stuff you do with the business legal life cycle. So one of the premises of this podcast is to say, hey, listen, you should have organic growth. Most businesses need to know how to get customers or clients, get 1, 2, 4, 10, 20, 100, whatever it is, right? Unless you're formed as a company that just acquires other companies or whatever, well, then even then, those are your clients, right? Your customers. So the point is, you need organic growth. But so many companies have an opportunity to also grow through deal-driven growth, inorganic growth, right? And so many few of them take advantage of that opportunity. And I always say to them, hey, we're looking to expand. We are expanding, whatever it is. Great. But, we want to get into this market and we're having trouble getting in there. Or our sales have stagnated, and you ask them, well, who else do you know that's in that market? Have you thought about doing a deal with them? Have you thought about all these expansion opportunities? It's amazing what a smaller percentage of the companies have even understand those opportunities. Is that something that in that expansion phase, the business legal life cycle talks about?
Absolutely. So we talk about organic growth, as you say, and we talk about maybe growing by starting another premises for your business. We talk about potentially franchising. Over here in Australia, franchises are very heavily regulated. They're not so regulated over there. And we talk about licensing, but we also talk about mergers and acquisitions and what it is that you need to look for from a legal perspective when you're looking to merge or acquire another company. Because I agree with you. I think it's a great way to be able to expand a business. And it comes back to your goal and what you actually want to achieve. But if you want to build a big company, you've got to have that growth 100%. But if you want to have really, really big growth, then you've got to look at acquiring. And there's lots of ways to look at that and what you need to do. So that's actually, as part of the expansion section, phase 7 deals with all of those particular areas of the life cycle. And from that legal perspective, what a business owner needs to put in place to protect themselves.
So you have the perspective on that from obviously all the companies that use this product and what they come up within the business, illegal or read your book or, whatever it is. And then also you have a practice where you do similar stuff to what I do in Australia, on deals and whatever. So what have you found? I mean, and it's great because this product you developed, is more mass available, right? Than individual advice. And I'm sure you've or maybe you've been able to gather some data or got even more insight into where people go wrong. I certainly have experience with that as a lawyer. You have experience with that as a lawyer. So, where is it? Let's take, for example, that expansion phase while we're talking about it, right? Mm-hmm. What are the mistakes? Whether it's doing bad deals, whether it's not taking opportunities of deals, whether it's not trying to find deals, not finding it, whatever it is. Talk to me about what you see that comes up. What are the mistakes people make and how, what you do to help them avoid them?
Yeah, so I think that probably the biggest mistake I see when people buy a company or they acquire something, an asset into their business is they don't think about what is it that they're trying to achieve? What's their goal with this? And I think that that's something that it sounds really simple, but for me, it's the thing that's missing all the time. I'm thinking of just recently dealing with a client. I don't do a lot of legal work anymore. I'm more focused on this business, but I still do some work for some very good clients. And a very good client of mine, very long-term client of mine, bought a new business. And he bought the business and then all the team quit, team of 15 people. And I said to him, what happened? And they never actually sat down with the team to talk about what they were doing and where they were going, what their goals were and everything. And that's just a small thing, but all he had to do was sit down and talk to that team and he would have found out what the problem was straight away, that these people had actually their own plans and were going off to do their own thing and set up in competition with them. So he bought this business and he's looking at acquiring multiple businesses. So he's taking it as a lesson learned. So his goal is to build a portfolio of businesses to do that. But he needed to talk to them. So actually talking to if you're going to merge with someone, talking to the other side about what is it that they want to achieve. If you're going to start a partnership, if that becomes a partnership, what is it that each party wants to go? But also talking to the team. Normally, when you do a contract and you know this, if you're the seller, you don't want your team knowing until you've actually got a deal that you're looking to sell. But you've got to make sure that you actually have that conversation with them to know what they're doing. And so for me, it doesn't matter whether it's a potential partner, a potential acquisition, or the team. You've got to have a conversation. And that's the thing that I see people missing. And it's not really legal advice, but it's something that definitely comes into the legal contract, into the legal aspect of it, is what is it that everyone wants? Where's everyone going? Knowing that will change. What is it? So that's probably the biggest thing. And I think that from my perspective and the deals that I've done over the years and negotiated for clients and done all the rest, if people just had a conversation earlier on, they would have just solved all those problems. And that comes into then, Corey, what I see is actually documenting the agreement. Now, people hate contracts. I used to love reading 50, 100-page contracts. Now they do my head in. I get people to do that, and then I get involved in the nitty-gritty. And I know that happens. But people not reading their contracts and not understanding what it is that they're agreeing to is the other big thing that I see. And at the end of the day, you have ownership, accountability, responsibility. We talk about that in the coaching space that I do, about having above the line thinking. And you can't just abdicate all of your responsibilities. So it's really around reading your contracts, understanding what the deal is, and making sure that what's in the contract actually is what you understand the deal to be. So I could go on forever. We could do a days-long podcast about all of the errors that people make. But those are the two big ones that I see, is the lack of understanding about what people's goals are and where they're trying to where they're trying to go, and not documenting their agreements properly to make sure that they understand what it is that the contract says, because that's the thing that if or when things go bad, everyone goes back and relies upon.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no question about it. And I love the way you started out, because you focused on, understanding, right, the other people's motivations, things like that. But you also, the first thing you mentioned was really your client, the buyer, the entrepreneur themselves, like why they're doing the deal. What's their vision for it? What's the purpose? Listen, most lawyers, frankly, client comes to them and says, hey, I got a deal, we have an LOI ready, term sheet or whatever. We want you to document the deal. The lawyer's going to say, great, okay, let's see, here's my retainer, blah, 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 whatever it is. All right. I always ask why. And people are set back a little bit, right? Because to me, in terms of the fees I'll make on a deal, the why question can only hurt me, right? But I know, in the short term thinking, right? But of course, I'm not a short-term thinker. I know that what benefits everybody is good deals, not bad deals. And a bad deal, could just mean that, I talk about this a lot as well, where, in the entrepreneurial community, there's this pressure to grow, right? And certain percentage of entrepreneurs grow, and it's great. They love it. They build something. It's great. And other entrepreneurs grow, and they wake up and they're like, all right, I got 30 more employees than I used to have. I got more headaches. I'm not necessarily making a lot more money. Like, why have I done this, right? And it's similar thing, on deals. So I always want to have that why conversation. What are the objectives? What are you really trying to achieve? This is really fit. I need to have a context, right? And so I love the fact that you're bringing that up. Understanding your own objectives even before you understand, and then yes, obviously the other party, the employees, the team, absolutely crucial. Yeah, great stuff.
And look, there's nothing wrong with the attorney not giving that advice, because that's not in their skill set. And if you don't have an attorney that gives you that advice, then go and get advice from a coach or someone who knows what they're who knows what they're talking about. That stuff, because that's not in every lawyer's wheelhouse. So, I know it wasn't mine when I started, and I've had to develop it as I go. So I agree with you 100%, Corey. And I think that there's a lot of merit in getting other bits of advice, and for lawyers not to be afraid to tell their client, I'm actually not sure about this, go and get advice somewhere else. We're very proud people, lawyers. We spent a long time doing our degrees. We've learned a lot and we know a lot, but there's some stuff that we don't know, and we shouldn't be afraid to say, oh, listen, I don't know that, and I'll go and get advice from over here. And guess what? When the client gets advice from over there, you can actually learn something yourself that you can apply later on. So yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Corey. I think it's an excellent point for people to learn.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. What had you? So you were practicing law, right? And you mentioned this a little bit on one of the deal that triggered it. Tell us a little bit more about the motivation to create, and also what happened first. Did you write the book first and then create the product, or how'd that all go?
So what happened was, I mentioned before the call, I've been working with a coach who's become a friend, and I actually now work with them for 10 years. And when I first started working with him, he said to me, Jeremy, one day you'll write a book. Mm-hmm. And I laughed at him and said, what lawyer writes a book that people will actually read? Right? And he just smiled at me and said, well, you'll see. And so what happened, and I can go into as much detail as you like, but I had two matters. One where a client almost lost $2 million of his own money because he was setting up franchises. And as I said before, franchises are very heavily regulated over here. And he just wasn't getting the right people. He was just taking anyone that came in, and he got sued for misrepresentation. And he thought he could just go bankrupt, and that meant all of his debts would go away. And he had about $600,000 worth of debt. He had over $2 million worth of property. And he just thought, he was at a barbecue literally and got barbecue advice saying, I'll just go bankrupt and you won't have to pay that money. And it was only luckily for him that my uncle was one of his best friends, was at that barbecue, and he said, I don't think that sounds right. Go and see my nephew. And I met with him, and I did a simple assets and liabilities statement for him, and he realized what he was about to lose. So that wasn't a deal one, but the other one was these two gentlemen. They formed a company to get approval to do a high-rise development in a place called the Gold Coast in Queensland, where I live. If people don't know the Gold Coast, it's a holiday mecca. When you're allowed to travel again, hopefully you can come over and check it out. It's very nice. But they were going to build a 30-story residential tower. My guy said that they were going to get approval to do that and then sell the deal to someone else to build it. And the other guy wanted to build it. They didn't actually have a conversation about what it is that they wanted to achieve. And it wasn't until they got the approval that my guy said, no, actually, I want to sell that approval to someone else to do the development, and we'll take a profit out of that. And these guys had not built more than a house between the two of them. But they just formed a company and gone off, and they borrowed all this money from family and friends and put in all their own money, over $1 million, to get this approval to put this high-rise development together. And they had no idea about what they wanted to do. And so they just hit logjam. There was no agreement. There was what we call a company constitution, the rules governing the company, but it doesn't really deal with much. And they just hit this logjam where they couldn't actually come to an agreement. And because they couldn't come to an agreement, they literally lost everyone's money because they couldn't agree on which way to go. That for me was a real moment where I went, why didn't you guys sit down and talk to each other about what you want to get, where you want to go? I have a business partner in my law firm, and we talked about at the beginning what we wanted to do. And he literally said, I just thought it was obvious. I assumed, and you know what they say about assumption. and it really frustrated me, because I said, why didn't you go and see a lawyer earlier? And it's like, it was going to cost me money. As I said, that they lost so much money. They both went bankrupt and they lost everything. Wow. And if they just sat down and had a talk beforehand, they probably would have never done the deal. And so that really, Corey, that really frustrated me. And at the time I was learning about life cycles of businesses. And so I sat down, one day, I spent probably a good week and went through what were the clients. And at that point I'd acted for about 5,000 different clients between my job I had previously and my own business. And I mapped out, when did I see people who did things well? What order did they do things? And then overlaid that with, when things went wrong, what didn't they do? And it took me a while, and I mapped out this life cycle. And my business partner in the law firm, Craig, and I, we went back and forwards a couple of times, and we had this map of a life cycle of what people need to do in their business. We had these 13 phases. And so just to, not to go on for too long, but I had 13 phases, and I realized there's 13 chapters. And so I rang my business coach and said, you were right. This is about 44. You were right. I now have a concept for a book. He laughed, and I think he appreciated my honesty. And so I wrote the book. And so I wrote the book as a kind of a brain dump, putting everything onto paper. And then from there, I developed, there's an online tool that we have that identifies your legal risks that goes through. And so I developed that for the law firm. Then I realized that would be a good product to help people worldwide, then develop the other books. And we won I live in a state called Queensland in Australia. We won the Queensland Law Society Innovation and Law Award for what we had developed, which was very, very, very exciting. We beat out all the big guys, which was even better for our little law firm. and so, it really developed. But that was the progression, was, the frustration, developing the cycle, writing the book, then coming up with the law tech tools to help us to help more people. And just recently, we're recording this at the beginning of 2022, and we've just launched our education course where we actually educate business owners on all the different legal things that they need to do in their business. So it takes time to develop all that, but that was the progression of what we did and how we put it together.
Well, a little mini, that aside, but related to, so when you did your book, did you self-publish? Did you hybrid publish?
I self-published. I worked with a business that does self-publish books, and he edited it. He had a legal background. He did push back on me on a few things because I do take a different view to lawyers in some respects of when you should do certain steps depending on the type of business. That was good though, because it kind of challenged me on what I wanted to do. But I did self-publish it, and I've self-published the UK and the US versions of it as well.
Right. So listeners, and we have international listeners. We have folks all over the place. Obviously, we have a higher concentration of folks in the US because that's where I'm based. But we have folks all over. So sounds like you can get it anywhere, right?
Absolutely, and we are developing the tools and the resources for every country that we can. India and Canada are next, and then and I've actually written the South African version of it, and I was going over to finalize that in March 2020, if you believe it, and that deal got cancelled.
Yeah, I hear that. So that's interesting. Are you so in terms of the in each country, are you doing this on your own, or do you have any local strategic alliances or joint ventures, or like how are you doing that?
Great question. I partner with a lawyer or attorney in the country. So, I partner with them. I get them to help me understand how the law is different. It's actually surprisingly similar because we don't get into the nitty gritty. Like in the US, like Australia, we've got multiple states. You've got multiple states. The actual nitty gritty of how you do things is very different per state. But this is all high level, getting you to understand why you need to do things so that you can then go and get the lawyer to go and do the work. So what we do is we partner with a lawyer or attorney in that jurisdiction. We rewrite the book. They help me to understand how the law is different. I rewrite it, and then they check it, make sure it's all right. Then we give it to the publisher, and then we release it out into the community after we've done that, so that it is very jurisdiction centric.
I had a sense that made sense because I don't know anybody in any business who, at least very rarely, can successfully go into a country without some sort of local relationship and do it right, at least in the beginning. So, that's great. That's another deal, right? Some sort of, partnership, joint venture, strategic alliance, however it's structured, but some sort of relationship with somebody on the ground in the countries you're going into, who knows the law, also knows, the market, hopefully, and that kind of stuff and whatever. So that's great. Yeah. And listen, that's a great example, listeners. You may not be writing a book or having a software product, but you may very well, with whatever your business is going into, whether it's other countries or even frankly, sometimes within the country, local knowledge, right, and local connections and local understanding make a difference, even state to state, or area to area, in some countries, province to province, whatever it is, because listen, we all know in the U.S. Different states are very, very different in terms of various things. Not only the laws, but culturally, et cetera. If you talk about Canada, I mean, British Columbia and Ontario and whatever. I mean, go through it. They're different, right? Talk about Montreal. Talk about Quebec. Certainly, very different than a lot of other places. So, what else do you see? Whether it's sort of trends, that you're seeing in terms that are more deal related, that you're seeing that companies are doing or leaning towards or figuring out, through this, business legal life cycle or just in general. What are you seeing? What are you seeing out in the marketplace?
We're seeing a lot of people starting up new businesses, especially over here. I don't know whether that's the same in the US, but a lot of people who aren't actually going that route of the mergers and acquisitions are actually starting up their own thing. Yeah. And that's great. But down the track, they want to look at the mergers and acquisitions, and deals to be done. And even, not to go into too much detail about it, but every contract you do is a deal of some sort. So, you are going to be doing those deals. So we're seeing a lot of startups, but we're talking to them a lot about, okay, making sure that whatever your goal is, what is it that you might want to do in the future, and factoring that in, and even just planting the seed, Corey, now is a great time to plant the seed of, okay, you're going to want to do this in the future, so let's make sure that your structure's right. I was talking to a gentleman just recently who has a company that he started, and it's a company and trust over here in Australia, and he's bringing in another employee as a shareholder, but he also wants to borrow money to buy property, and that over here creates complexity that he didn't even appreciate, because that person's now in the company. And so not that the company's borrowing the money, but that's his source of income. So that then creates all these other problems on the other end. So it's really around, okay, even if you are starting new, think for the future, always have the future in mind. Have Stephen Covey talks about in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's habit number 2 is start with the end in mind. And I say start up with an end in mind, because the end will always change. Like if you told me a decade ago that I'd be recording podcasts and having come up with Lifecycle, I would laugh at you.
The end was never really the end.
That's right. But I changed it to an end. So know where you're going at that point in time, knowing that will change. And so we're giving a lot of advice around that. We're giving a lot of advice around, okay, What is it that you're doing now, and where might that go in the future? And we're finding that's resonating really well. I know that in the bigger corporate space, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on at the moment. We don't really play in that field, but I do know that's a big thing that's going on right now.
But it's interesting. One of the things we always talk about on this podcast is that my assertion is that any company of any size in any industry, with or without capital, there's some sort of deal you can do. Right? Well, there's a business partnership, license deal, strategic alliance, just joint marketing, deal, distribution, whatever it is, right? So, through any stage in your business legal life cycle, there are deals. People have that misconception that, I need capital, or I need, or I'm talking about only big M&A or venture capital funding. And that's one of the myths that we're trying to, dispel here. And it's an interesting point you make about a lot of what we do is, I love the point you made about trying to anticipate, right? Because, we work with a lot of startup companies as well, and it's interesting, because some startup companies are, all right, somebody's hanging out at Shingle, somebody's, opening the corner store, and they don't have, but a lot of startup companies these days, whether in the tech, we do a lot in financial services, investment advisors, things like that. They're coming out and starting up in a much more sophisticated mindset, right? They're coming out, starting knowing that they want to grow, right? So what you do, for example, with the equity structuring up front can impact their, do we need an equity class to attract other people to tuck in, give to other company owners if you're going to buy them, or, in the investment advisor space where we do a lot, you want to bring on other advisors who have books of business. Do you need an equity class for them? Is it going to be capital equity? Is it going to be profits interest? It's going to be whatever. It's different in every country. But the point is that the upfront planning, especially for growth companies, it makes a big difference. Now, of course, you can always retrofit and change things and figure it out later, but it's much cleaner if you can properly anticipate to the best you can. Things change, right? Not only does the end change, the middle changes as well, right? But but at least to the extent you can see it, that kind of planning is super important. And it's one of the things I love about the business, the life cycle that you're doing, because it's legal life cycle, because it encourages that kind of forward thinking, right? It encourages that planning, that looking ahead, which really makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that whole let's be proactive and not reactive approach. And I'm very, very big on that, because I've seen the other side of it. I've seen the cost that it has. And a small investment now, of time and money, can save you a lot going into the future, as you know.
Yeah. Love it. Let's talk a little bit more about, you mentioned who this is for generally. I noticed on your website that this is actually something that's available for businesses and for attorneys, right? So talk about the model a little bit on your side, who it's for, where people can find it, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so it's designed for those small to medium-sized business owners that we talked about. That's probably about 20 employees, about $30 million worth of revenue, and below that. So they can go to the businesslegallifecycle.com. I've put together a special page, businesslegallifecycle.com/dealquest, which will have a 50% discount as a thank you for having me on for the listeners. They'll be able to go on there and enter the code, and you'll be able to do the test, and that identifies the legal risks for your business. It's all about really identifying those legal risks. And then from that, they can take, we have an education course that goes with it. There's lots of free resources on there too, as well. We give a lot of information about why you need to do things, with the knowledge that it's not specific, it's not specific to you. You got to get legal, you got to get someone to go and implement it. Sure. But by empowering you with the knowledge of what you need and why you need it, it gives you that power to go to the attorney or the lawyer and say, this is what I need to do, and this is where I need to go with the business. So there's lots of information that people can get on there, and it'll help them to really get their understanding. But don't try and do it yourself. Make sure that you get the lawyer to actually help you.
And that was businesslegallifecycle.com.
Yes, businesslegallifecycle.com/dealquest.
So DealQuest, right, is the special code that we have for listeners to the episode. That's great. And then in terms of your book, can they get that there on Amazon, all that kind of stuff as well? Or?
It's available through the website. Amazon has all 3 copies. Just make sure that you're getting the right edition. But whilst they are still relevant, most of it's still relevant for all countries. There's an Australian edition, a US edition, and a UK edition. But if you just type, it's very obvious which one's which. It says so in the title. So people can do that, or they can go to our website, and we have it all on there, and they can get copies of it on our website.
Excellent. Great stuff. All right. So my final question on the podcast is always about my highest ideal and value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom for all people from oppression in the world to the reason I'm an entrepreneur and haven't had a boss in decades. What does freedom mean to you, and what is it, and how does it apply in your life and business?
For me, that it's around knowledge, and I think that knowledge and education gives freedom. I truly believe that. I'm a big reader. I learn. I make sure I read 3 hours a day, or listen to podcasts, or do some sort of education for 3 hours a day, because I'm a big believer that from knowledge comes freedom. And the more that we can empower people with that knowledge, the more free they can become, and the more that they can make their own decisions.
I love it. And listen, that's so consistent. I mean, that's obviously, not that I would doubt it, but it's obvious, it's like in your actions, it shows it's true for you, because the business legal life cycle is exactly doing that, right? It's providing people with knowledge, with information, so that they can make better and more proactive decisions. That's awesome. Great stuff. Well, listen, Jeremy, I'm so thrilled that you were a guest. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Corey. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.